All right, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. I would like to call the October 19th, 2022 board meeting to order and remind everyone to please mute your audio when not speaking, as well as state your name prior to making a comment or motion and a second for an action item. I'll begin by asking each commissioner to please respond with a here when I call out their name. Commissioner Doan,
Here.
Commissioner Duggan,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
and Commissioner Lysick.
Here.
Congratulations. Wonderful. Well, we'll begin this evening by having our reports from the CEO and management staff.
Thank you, Chair Sanders and board members. Good evening. Yeah, we're at evening. Uh, so, I'll start out with WEFTech Communications cohort. Our communications supervisor, Andrea Watson, she was selected to be part of a cohort that went to WEFTech, which is probably one of the largest water conferences in the world that you can attend. I've gone several times myself in my career. It's a great conference. Um, and she went with the Rogue Water Lab because she actually got a scholarship through them to attend. So they picked up her the costs to attend that, and it was a great opportunity for communications in the water world and the water sector. Um, to really work together and look at various things, various innovations in the communications world, and issues on sustainable development and live studios. Um, One of the things that the WEF laid out is they are actually looking for water stories. So not just wastewater, but water stories. And they're doing this to actually create more diversity in the water sector, because they've found that it's the stories that convince people to, join things, do things, become part of things. If you're interested in that and have a water story, I think we should work with Andrea and see if we can't get that out there. All right. Then last Friday, there was a forum with Senator Wyden and myself and Commissioner Doan, along with Andrea, attended the West Side Economic Alliance, featuring Senator Ron Wyden. He covered a number of things, but provided a legislative update. And I think probably my biggest takeaway, at least, I had to leave a few minutes early for another meeting, but it was around the fact that he basically said chip manufacturing is going to remain strong in Washington County. It is not going away. Despite investments that are going on in Ohio, he felt very confident that it will remain a stable part of this economy in this region. Let's see here. On to our upcoming November 1st work session. To be honest with you, and for Commissioner Lysick, new to this, our work sessions are optional. We are light on material for this. We are suggesting to the board tonight that we cancel that work session. We don't see a significant reason to hold that. Even the WWSS, the normal commission update that we do for that, even that now is stretching out to kind of every other month because there's not a lot happening there in terms of new decisions being made. So my question to the board on this is, does the board support canceling this work session?
This is Jim Dowd, please.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Otherwise, we're going to have to do some live tap dancing for you to fill the time. So
Oh, hold it then. Well, maybe
and I'm not good at it. So
never mind. Never mind.
Okay. So unless there's any other questions for me, I would like to turn this over to Clark Balfour, our general counsel, so he can present the safety minute and the legal department report.
Such as it is. So, good evening, everybody. We'll start with the safety moment on bike safety. Paul's going to flip my slides for me, I believe. There you go. Let's go to the next one, Paul. So, I'm just thinking, it's darker in the morning. You can see the daylight cutting down. We're going to be in pretty dark weather soon, and I thought, there's people out on bikes and cars and going to work and school and whatever else. And it's probably a good time to just talk from both the perspective of the cyclist and the perspective of the motorist. And we all occupy one or both of those positions, to just kind of have a refresher on where we are. So, you know, it's great to ride. I enjoy it. I know there are some very serious riders here, and so that you can correct me as we go along, and I'll even give you an opportunity coming up for a little participation. Usually I want to keep my safety moments where I control the whole thing, but this time I'll ask you a question and you can give me your opinion. So, uh, the thing is, as I've read, another thing that prompted me to talk about this is I've just read recently locally about some just horrible accidents and fatalities and that sort of thing. So I just always think it's a timely message. Next slide, please. There you go. So if you're the motorist, give folks room and don't pass too closely. And particularly if there's not a good shoulder or a bike lane and they're on the white line, give them the white line. Adjust your speed, make sure you can get over, but try to give them as much room as you can. Second, remember when you do have a bike lane, the bike lane belongs to the cyclist. And then there are going to be points where maybe there's going to be a right turn lane or something like that, and you're going to have a weave lane to let the cyclist get across. So really watch the weave lane and honor that, and also remember that the bike lane um, does belong to the cyclist. So don't park there, don't and really don't drive there either. We'll get to that in a second. Yield to cyclists as you would to other motorists. Treat them like they're on the road, and they need to, in turn, to do the same thing with you. And if you're going to turn on a red light, particularly stop completely and look for cyclists coming up in the bike lane. They sometimes appear out of nowhere, so watch for them. And also, don't use the bike lane as a pseudo right turn lane. Maintain it, keep it for the cyclist. And finally, my favorite, because I've actually had this happen to me and I've avoided it. Somebody opens a door right on you. So always check before you open the car door. Next slide, please. Okay, now if you're on the cyclist side of the fence, you know, wear a helmet, ensure your bike's in good working order, and bike defensively. Don't put your ear pods in. Don't just assume that you've got a lane and you can go like you're trying to do track racing and you don't have to obey any signals or watch for cars. And stay visible. Bike lights, bright colored or reflective clothing, all those things, particularly as we get into the winter. Obey rules of the road and use hand signals. Now, this is going to be the audience participation part. So um, if you look on the right, the stop and slow down signs, hand signals are pretty universal. But if you look on the left, we've got the universal left turn signal. And then this is what I've been struggling with, the right turn, because I always learned that the right turn was the perpendicular right angle, left arm up that I'm going right. But they also show that a right signal with your right arm would be okay as well. Um, I always learned that it was the other way, but that comes back from that was how I learned to drive a car and how to do hand signals and those sorts of things. So I'm going to throw it open to the group right now. Is there do have people seen and do people use the right hand right turn signal, or do they use the traditional one that you learned as a motorist? Okay, Commissioner Sanders shaking his head.
Point the direction you're turning.
Okay, there you go. I learn something every day.
Yep.
All right. Well, then I guess that explains why people were waving at me when I gave the right turn signal. So, okay, I've got it. Um, all right. Well, then we learned something. Okay, Catherine, the next time we use this slide, X out the little dude in the middle there, and then we'll just go that way. Okay. And finally, stay out of blind spots and remain focused and aware. And with that, questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. This was helpful. I learned something today. This was worth the price of admission to get my hand signals down. All right. The next thing we have is the legal department report, and this is a always very high level thing. If you have more specific questions about these, please send me a note or give me a call or something, and we can talk about things in more depth. So let's look to the next slide, Paul. Okay, so current focus is really we've just finished the contracts and we're just now getting started on the mission, vision, and values and the class compensation studies. So, those were sort of in the formative stage. I think the last time I talked to you, we finally got through the selection process for the consultants, the the negotiation of the contracts and getting those signed. And now they're actually starting their work and they're a little bit into that. But that is something that we've been focused on over the last few months and really just concluded a little bit ago. We do have our one pending litigation piece that we've talked about in executive session and we'll continue to talk about it. We are dealing with some issues right now on closeout of the WIF and WWSS easement issues for land in Wilsonville. And with that is also some Tualatin Valley Water, Wilsonville specific real estate issues. So the WIF easements and the WWSS easements are things that are coming about as a result of the project now getting to completion for that portion of work in Wilsonville. And then there's some larger TVWD Wilsonville real estate matters related to the same grouping of parcels. So we anticipate talking to you about those in a little bit more depth next month because we're going to have to start getting into some, staff's going to need some direction on where to go. We always have ongoing contracts, solicitations, project administration kinds of questions, those sorts of things. So those just come up on a daily basis. And then a curious thing that we're monitoring, I don't think it really affects TVWD because it's primarily related to groundwater, but the Water Resources Department is ready to kick off a rulemaking for groundwater allocation. And TVWD, we have ASR wells and things like that. So as I said, it doesn't really impact us, but the impact locally and to keep our eye on is that there may now be a new regime for the permitting and other regulatory action related to exempt wells, and exempt wells being those that you might see in your rural residential property. Certainly, if you've got wells for irrigation, agricultural use, that sort of thing, those are all permitted. But now it's the management of groundwater resources has become very focused, and probably there's been some criticism of the Water Resources Department. So they're looking at maybe getting a better handle on all of the individual exempt wells that are serving residences out in rural areas. And I think, and that ultimately might have an impact on us in terms of how service area boundaries might be expanded into farm zones, depending upon groundwater supplies dwindling, people actually being in a health crisis, and then needing to connect to public water systems. So it's just something we want to keep our eye on. although I don't know that it's really going to affect us that much. Next slide, please. And now we're getting into the legislative decision. There are just a couple of things that I want to talk to you about, although certainly there's going to be a lot more over the next few months and then into 2023, obviously. But right now, there seem to be a couple of proposals out there that I think might be worth keeping our eyes on. And certainly we would need to explore these more and maybe call the people that are sponsoring these things. The first one is a bill that is going to be promoted, a legislative concept at this point. It's going to be promoted by Clackamas River Water because they've got some particular issues regarding annexation and then withdrawal of infrastructure in Oregon City. And so they want to introduce a bill to require the city to withdraw infrastructure and customers following annexation, and here's the important part, and provision of service. I don't know exactly what the details are, but a bill like this, may have an impact on other agreements we have. And so we want to make sure that we understand what the problem is they're trying to fix, whether or not that's something that we should support because maybe it helps us, or maybe it's something that we need to see about modifications for. So stay tuned on that. I think I'm not sure how big this thing is at this point. It's just a concept that's been floating around. The next one I think is maybe even a little more interesting. So you as elected officials are you're elected and you're not removed unless either you lose an election, you decide not to run, or you resign, right? Essentially, or recall. I guess that's a possibility too. But the voters either you have to do something or the voters have to do something. But one thing that has been problematic, and it's a question that's come up over the years, is, well, what if somebody is just chronically absent and it's unexcused? Who knows? They're living in New Mexico for half the year and they don't bother to go to board meetings. So there's a proposal that's being kicked around now where, as a local option, a district or a local government could have a provision that if there are chronic unexcused absences, that board member could be removed by action of the other directors, commissioners, counselors, whatever. So it's a very interesting topic, and I think that it's something, I don't know if it's going to have any traction or not, but I think it's something that we should check and see what's there. Next one is system development charges. Last session, there was House Bill 4040 that essentially was a work group. I think it was, I can't remember. Representative Lively, I think. Anyway, there was a work group to talk about system development charges and, essentially how they could be, they were studied from the standpoint of affordable housing, how they could maybe work with affordable housing if that meant discounts or some other method of lessening that burden. From the water and sewer side, most of the proposals were around the time of collection, not really impacting what we would charge, but the time of collection, like when the occupancy permit was issued. That presents its own problems because we're not part of the building permit process. The city or the county is the building official. They issue the building permits. They're also going to issue then their certificate of occupancy. And if we had to wait for payment when that occupancy certificate is issued, we may or may not know. So, our purpose has always been, we like the objective time of when you tap into our system, and that goes for both water and wastewater. So that issue is going to be on the table again. There was a draft report released yesterday to the legislative committee as they prepare to take up whatever it is they're going to do in January. But anyway, this issue is going to be back at the forefront. The curious thing is, not curious, but this started as a bill and consideration of system development charges as they affect affordable housing. It's now morphed, and it's now morphed to all housing of any kind. So that may cause us to have other considerations of, accommodations being made, accommodations that aren't made, whatever our position is going to be. Finally, I think I talked to you a while ago about a Oregon Supreme Court case regarding the Warm Springs Hydro project. And essentially what it was is a very, very old water right over in Eastern Oregon that had been used for hydro purposes started in like 1905, something like that. And it was a low generating electricity project. It went on and on. And then in about, I don't know, 2000, they stopped using it. And they stopped using it for more than, well, they leased it. They did in-stream leases, but they stopped using it for hydroelectric purposes. And in the 90s, the legislature put a statute through that said, if you stop using a hydro project for a period of 5 years, then it automatically reverts to the state. And so the challenge for Warm Springs Hydro was they were trying to get it going again, and Water Watch came in and challenged, saying, "Listen, it doesn't matter that you did an in-stream lease, and even though the in-stream lease statutes say that tolls any abandonment or forfeiture question, the legislature was very specific on hydro licenses only. So this is only hydro. It's not general surface water used for drinking water or anything like that. But on hydro licensing, those rules don't apply. It's a hard stop. You didn't use it for 5 years, you're done. And the Supreme Court agreed with that and said the legislature's free to fix that if they want, but they haven't really fixed it. So now the discussion is, because that has a lot of people up in arms, EWEB, Pacific Corp, PGE, anybody who has a dam who is subject particularly to FERC licensing and where you have to either go through, license renewal, or you get an order, say, from the dam safety folks saying, we think that you need to redo your canal for your penstock. And guess what? You've got to take that canal down. You got to do a bunch of environmental permitting. You need to also get your plans approved by FERC. And then you've got to go through and do all this work. Well, guess what? This is the EWEB example right now. They're in that very bind where it's going to take them 10 or 15 years to get that work done with all the regulatory approval they've got to do. Yet at the same time, they're not putting water through the canal, and under Warm Springs Hydro, the 5-year clock is ticking. So there's now a move to try to make a distinction between rights that will be used or rights that are not being used because of maintenance, relicensing, some kind of regulatory process, versus what they're calling zombie water rights, ones that are really dead and maybe someone's trying to revive them. So watch for that. I think that's more of interest to you, and I'm sorry to bore you with it, but from the water permitting side of the fence, this is kind of a fascinating topic, and I don't know. I just think it's worth watching. So sorry if I bored you. Next slide, please. I guess I'm up for questions. So with that, if you have any questions, let me know.
Well, my only question is, did you go for a bike ride today?
Oh, I actually was not able to get out, and besides, it was kind of smoky. I didn't really want to go out and breathe. So there you go.
Yeah, don't blame you there. All right.
By the way, I do want to go back and just say one thing. I'm sorry. The consultants for the SDC effort were Echo Northwest or Econ Northwest. I'm never sure how to pronounce that. And the FCS group, folks that have helped us before. So I feel like the SDC report that was put out and is now going to be kicked around. Probably I haven't read it all because it was like 150 pages that we got 15 minutes before the meeting. But I think it'll treat the issues fairly, I think. So it should be a good starting point. Sorry. And now, if there's questions or nothing, we have the 8-second rule of Dave Kraska that has expired. We can go from there.
Thank you, Clark.
Sorry, thanks.
All right. Have a good day. Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is Commissioner Communications. And we'll begin this evening with Commissioner Doan.
Yes, fantastic. Okay. Well, let's say working backwards from today, we had a water discussion at noon about how to winterize your house. And it went fine. There were fewer people than expected, but it went fine. Um, Last week, I attended a 7-hour class on earthquakes, which is always near and dear to my heart. And seeing that people who I knew when I was on the Seismic Commission are still floating around doing seismic stuff. And then there was the West Side Economic Alliance last Friday morning. The interesting thing is I walked into this room and nobody had a mask on, including Senator Wyden, which sort of shocked me. Then we went to the Joint Water Commission later on in the day, and Todd had to leave. And the way they had the camera, since I followed Todd in the succession, I had to hold the gavel out so the camera could see it when I wanted to raise a point, which I thought was very interesting. And I talked to Tom about this, and we will do a better job with our camera work when we do virtual and quasi-virtual meetings. Uh, Actually, it worked out really well for me because it's captioned. And for the first time in my life, at a Joint Water Commission meeting, I could see what was being said. And it was just a remarkable situation for me because of my hearing loss. And then earlier this month, we had the work session. And that's really it for me. Oh, and later this month, we have a Willamette Intake Facilities meeting. And I'll report on that next month.
Thank you, Commissioner Doan. Commissioner Duggan.
On September 29th, I attended the Washington County Town Hall where the county commissioners talked about their fiscal year 22-23 budget priorities. On September 29th and 30th, I attended the Oregon State Board of Engineering Examiners Symposium, which is where they did a lot of technical presentations, and I earned some PDHs for my PE, and I really am glad that I can combine some water training, so to speak, with my professional development. There were a number of interesting presentations, none directly related to water provision, but there were quite a few things relating to climate change and concern about how that's affecting the Northwest. On October 4th, we had our a monthly work session where we received an update about the WWSS and also the result of our latest customer survey. On the 6th of October, I attended the WWSS board meeting, and we also had an executive session, and it was the last regular monthly meeting that we're going to have as we're moving in December to every other month. Also on the 6th, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium board meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum to do anything official, but we had a good evening in breakout sessions, and then also staff gave a presentation on their budget concepts for the next fiscal year. There was a short discussion afterward, but nothing earth-shattering to report from the Regional Water Providers Consortium. Last Tuesday, the 11th, I met with Todd and Tom regarding planning for tonight's meeting. Also on the 11th, I attended a webinar put on by Syracuse University talking about the power of regionalization. Unfortunately, the Portland area, the Regional Water Providers Consortium wasn't mentioned, but there were some other really good examples of agencies getting together in other parts of the country that I was interested to hear about. Yesterday, I attended the first fully public meeting in person where we had our rate advisory committee kickoff meeting. Staff and the consultant team did an excellent job of getting us all introduced and introduced to the topic as we go forward with rate advisory. Today, I also attended the Talking Water webinar and then tonight's meeting. And so, also yesterday I attended it was a Zoom meeting by the team working for the legislative committee that asked for the SDC study that Clark referred to in his presentation concerning affordability. It started out as affordability, but it was really clear that they gathered all sorts of excellent raw data and information that they have packaged together on how SDCs are administered throughout the state, where SDCs are collected and how much. It was just a lot of really good information. And also the amount of SDCs that have been collected over time, and also expenditures of local and federal government as it relates to infrastructure construction. So really good information yesterday. That Clark touched on it briefly. They really didn't have any recommendations. They were just in the data and crunching stage right now with their current report. So sorry for expounding on that. I just wanted to let my fellow commissioners know that I attended that meeting as well as staff. I noticed that staff attended, seeing the questions that were being asked in the chat. But it was well worth the time to spend an hour and a half hearing about systems development charges and the way things may go sideways if certain special interests get their way without considering all the implications if the SDC law changes. So that's it for this month. Sorry again for going on about that, but I thought it important to talk.
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Commissioner Fisher.
Good evening, everybody. At the end of September, I attended the Metzger-Durham CPO 4 meeting. I get the agenda in my mailbox at home, so when I saw that TVWD was going to be giving a little presentation during the meeting, I figured I want to tune in and see exactly what our organization does at those meetings when we are asked to give a presentation. And staff did a very good job presenting about all the recent updates going on in the Metzger area. And I thought traffic would be of a complaint, knowing some of the folks on the Metzger CPO, but it turned out they didn't care at all about the traffic. They wanted to know how they got the water from Portland to Metzger. So that was fun to hear the staff explain that to them. Then I attended the TVWD work session, and along with Commissioner Duggan, I also attended the very first RAC meeting, which was very nice. And then I'm attending this meeting tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Lysick.
Good evening, everybody. First
Hello.
time I'm actually speaking on camera, really. On the 4th, I attended the work session, which has already been mentioned. And then on October 6th, stakeholder interview to cover mission, vision, values. On October 10th, I had a series of leadership meetings from 9:30 until 3:30 with various TVWD leadership, going through commissioner onboarding. And then on the 12th, had a happy hour with leadership team members as well. Earlier today, there were a couple, for scheduling reasons, there were just a couple of folks from the leadership team that I couldn't onboard with, so we wrapped that up this afternoon. And then the board meeting this evening.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Lysick. And you did a wonderful job for your first time speaking. We look forward to when we can all sit together in the room behind our dais again and be face to face. I noticed on the PowerPoint presentation that other than myself, the other two members are no longer on our board. So we need to get together soon so we can get an updated photograph. Jim's last night was my first meeting cookie. Oh, wow. That is a big deal. Wonderful. Okay, well, with that, then my work for the month, and I will say that the majority of it is around legislative outreach stuff. On the 26th, I met with Tom to talk about updates on what we were doing. On the 27th, myself and a member of CFM, who is our legislative lobbyist group, we met with candidate FAM, whose district includes some of the western parts of TVWD. We had a face-to-face meeting with Dr. Pham. On the 28th, I was in the office to sign forms. On the 29th, I was scheduling meetings with more legislators. And then including the 30th, where I met with CFM's Norm Eater. And then on the 9th, I met with the other CFM people on the 3rd. My apologies. Then on the 4th, I met with Nikki from Hillsborough Water. She's our director of JWC, and we went over the agenda review for the JWC meeting that was just last week. And then on the 5th, I met with Tom to begin discussions about some of the annual review things that Tom will be going through his annual review this fall. Then on the 6th, myself and Andrea and Ryan from CFM, we met virtually with a staff member of Senator Wagner's office to again do legislative outreach. The 10th, again, I met with Tom to update on what we were talking about. The 11th, as you heard from Commissioner Duggan, we met to do our board agenda planning meeting. And then that afternoon on the 11th, we had the Willamette River Water Coalition meeting. And I'll stop there just to highlight one issue, and we'll reach out to talk to Commissioner Doan about this more. Our friends at Sherwood in particular are very interested in, excuse me, oh, my ear really itched. Our friends at Sherwood are very much interested in making sure that their water rights get certified sooner rather than later. And then so there was some discussion about making sure that whatever was happening with the Willamette River Water Coalition, that they would like to make sure that that was collaborative with what was happening on the WIF Council. So as we move forward, the folks on the Water Commission would like to emphasize the importance of certification of water rights, especially with regards to those water rights and those certifications that will be part of the future of the Willamette system as it becomes operational. On the 12th, I met with Norm again, and he came up with a great idea. I don't know where it is, and I don't want to spoil it if it's going to fail, but we came up with an idea on a great way to perhaps collaborate or have a collaborative meeting with the council members of the city of Beaverton. And if Tom's here, maybe I'll ask him if we have an update.
We do.
Oh, we
So,
do? Okay.
yes. It won't work out for the date that we were hoping,
Mhm.
but we will meet with him when he's here next month. And we are going to look for some dates where we can have him come back and speak to some of the elected folks in the region about affordability
Okay.
and the challenges with that. So I'll be working with you about how we set that up, and because what I'm thinking right now is almost three separate meetings, but one of them would be a joint meeting between us and the city of Beaverton City Council, and have Professor Theodora talk to us about what are some of the things that we can do to make sure that we are we make our water rates as affordable as possible.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So just to let the other commissioners know, we've been talking about how to reach out to the council members of the city of Beaverton. Per our IGA, we are supposed to meet, I believe, Clark, is it correct, annually? And I apologize if I'm cold calling Clark there.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're supposed to meet annually, and it's not happened in my experience yet here at TVWD. But we're attempting to to get together our board with the council members of the city of Beaverton and try to build some relationships as we move forward with our shared infrastructure for the next rest of our lifetimes together. And one of the ways that we talked about doing so was to have a meeting that had no agenda other than to share knowledge and information, and using Manny Teodoro's presence here was going to be a possible way to do that. And maybe if Paul's still on the line, maybe Paul wants to tell us who Dr. Teodoro is.
You bet, President Sanders. So Dr. Teodoro is a longtime member of the water industry, an author of a book, a professor. Started out at Colgate, went to University of Texas, and now is in Wisconsin. But he's an expert on a lot of matters. Actually, political scientist is the area in which he hails from, but has spent a considerable amount of time studying water utilities and the political functions of water utility and the effects of affordability and other issues in that area. Excellent speaker. We've brought him to Oregon twice, once for the CFO Forum, and Commissioner Lysak, I'm not sure if you attended that. That was a joint meeting that TVWD in Portland did together with Sicilian Company. He was there, and then we brought him to the OGFOA to be a keynote speaker. So he's a great speaker, great information, and a really nice guy too, by the way. Just to let you know, a friend was a consultant here in the Portland area, used to be a competitor of mine a lot of years ago, before he went off and became an academic. So I really look forward to having him as part of our rate advisory committee. He will be here for that. And in fact, it's a public meeting, so all of you could attend that if you chose to and get a preview. He's going to be looking at our service area and helping us understand how many of our customers really are in need of financial assistance. I don't know, President Sanders, is that what you wanted, or I probably give you more than you asked for, but thank you.
Nope, that was absolutely perfect. We're really fortunate in the fact that Dr. Teodoro's interested and wants to work with TVWD, and now we're just taking full advantage of it. And it sounds like Tom's figured out as long as we're willing to pay for his services, he's willing to do anything. Oh yeah, Debbie, yes, I forgot about that too. We'll mention that in a second. Um, so yeah, Norm came up with a grand idea when I was talking to him about how to approach the city of Beaverton, and Norm came up with a great idea. And then in talking with Tom, he felt that it was an opportunity to see if we could get Dr. Teodoro to come back. And then on top of that, further down in my month, after talking to a few more of the legislators, it became obvious that there would be a lot of interest in some of the legislative representatives and senators in our area would also gain a great deal from listening to Dr. Teodoro talk. So when Tom mentioned a third visit, it would probably be after the legislative session starts, and we would invite some of our representatives and senators from the area to come and hear Dr. Teodoro speak again. So continuing on the 13th of this month, I met with, not quite with public comment yet, I met with my, thank you. Rayanne and I met with Oregon Water Resources, some of their directors, to tell them about the Willamette project. So, and also to get their opinion on areas of focus as we speak to the legislators. On the 14th, I attended the JWC quarterly meeting, and as Commissioner Doan said, he rescued me. I had to leave, and Commissioner Doan took over and did a masterful job of uh, of working through the rest of the meeting, because I left to go meet with candidate Bauman to do a face-to-face talk with him as well for another legislative outreach. And candidate Bauman represents may, knock on wood, may represent including the Metzger area. And just for another connection, Carl Fisher is a friend of candidate Bauman's. Andrea Watson's husband was candidate Bauman's teacher, and Rayanne from CFM went to camp with him. So there was a lot of nice ties there. Then we did some more outreach planning. Then we met on the 17th with Representative Sosa. Representative Sosa has our western parts of our district as well as the Hillsborough area. He was really supportive of our needs and asked extremely good questions about which direction this would come through as a bill, and he was supportive as well. So we had some great group things, great things happen there. And then tonight's meeting. So like 4 out of 5 days each week for the last month, we've been doing something, but it's really paid off well. And having Andrea on board for these meetings is beyond helpful. Her knowledge base is absolutely critical when people ask questions and I get this look on my face of, Andrea steps right in and knows the answer. So it's been good, and we've got it's at least 3 more scheduled before Thanksgiving, and then probably going to reach out again to those members after election date, because they'll probably be in place now, and try to circle around with them before they head off to session in winter. Okay, thank you. And now we can move on to the next item, which is before public comment, I do just have to ask if we have any topics to be raised by commissioners before we move on to public comment. Okay, not hearing any. We'll move on to public comment. Public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the agenda. Additional public comment will be invited on agenda items as they are presented. Do we have any persons this evening who would like to comment? All right. Not hearing any this evening, we'll move on to our agenda this evening, which begins with our consent agenda. And the consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require discussion. We have this evening the approval of the September 21st, 2022 regular meeting minutes and approve the October 4th, 2022 work session minutes. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is Jim Doan, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Dome.
Commissioner Fisher, I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher, for your second. May I ask that please ask the executive assistant to provide us with a roll call vote?
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Lysick,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll now move on to our business agenda, where we will consider updating and approving board officers and committee appointments for the 2022-2023. And we have a staff report from Tom Hickman. This is both in your packet and should probably come up on the screen in a moment as well. There we
Thank
go.
you, President Sanders. So this is essentially every year we take a look at our appointments and assignments, what board members are serving in what roles with various committees. We did this, if you recall, I believe back in August, and we were short a board member at the time. So there were some spots held open, and we also felt like it would be something that the board as a whole, once we have 4 or 5 board members as we do now, that maybe you would want to reconsider what assignments have been handed out here, or who's sitting where. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to the board for board discussion. As you can see, the ones that are highlighted yellow, those are the seats that we need somebody assigned to, but there may be others here that you want to have a discussion about because of a particular interest. So we just highlighted the ones that we have openings on.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so starting at the top and working our way down, as of right now, we have the acting secretary is not occupied. So the acting secretary role, Clark, could you give us a good description of what the acting secretary role is? I don't think I have one.
It's really not something that we have to have, but we created it years ago because it seemed to me that somebody who was sitting in the secretarial role at that point, and remember that there's monthly meetings, there's other documents that need to be signed, that sort of thing. So the need for a signature from that person was, necessary, and it happened, and it occurred often, and was a recurring thing. So that person, I think, had business interests or something where they may or may not be there. We didn't want to hold up approval of minutes and some of those other things. So we created the acting secretary role. However, that has not been an issue for years and years. So it's a position that is not required, but it's a position that we created. So you can choose to leave it blank, or you could choose to fill it. But anyway, that's the genesis of the position.
Okay, well, thank you. I've always wondered. Maybe we can see if our latest member here, Commissioner Lysick, would you like to satisfy that role for the time being as kind of a first step for you?
I know it feels very presumptive, but looking at the table earlier, that's sort of what I had assumed. So yeah, no big surprise there. That's great.
No, it sounds like that's a position that may or may not have met its purpose in the past. But again, we'd like to start you off where you're comfortable and not put too much on you, because we're going to ask you for something different in just a couple minutes. But maybe that's a good place to start in terms of sort of the board office activities as acting secretary. So
Yep, that sounds great.
we'll have you take that role. We have the policy and board development committee. As of now, that's Commissioner Duggan. Again, I don't really know too much about this role, and maybe again I can lean on Clark for some information, or Tom, or I'm not sure who would be the person to tell us the most about this position.
Well, I can, Clark, and Clark, please, if I get any of this wrong, correct me. So the policy board is something that I think we meet typically once a year just to review the board policies. Do they need to be updated? We recently did that. But sometimes as we review those board policies, we find there needs to be update, and this is an opportunity for a couple of commissioners to work directly with the staff here to, if there's one of concern, we can address it, and then we bring it back to the full board. But we work with this committee to address those changes or issues of concern with any of the board policy, as well as board policies, new board policies that are required as a result of legislative action. So Clark, did I miss anything?
No, I think you pretty well got it. It's a standing committee for the most part to deal with things like Tom just described. There's a change or something that we need to act upon, but we also use it as the place to start periodic review. And I think we did it 2 years ago. I want to say I think it was a pre-COVID thing. So anyway, we looked at the policies then. The committee convened probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 times over the course of a year, and we took the policies in sections and worked through them, and then presented a package to the board. So it may be time to do that again. Maybe not immediately, but next year, the year after, we might take another run through for periodic review. It's always good practice to do that, and I think we actually get a couple of points for our SDIS insurance rating if we say that we went through and did our board policy review. So maybe that's something to put on the schedule for at late 23 or early 24. And then it would just be a as needed thing until then. So that's the genesis.
Understood. Excellent. That sounds like something perhaps someone who knows the position longer. I don't know if Commissioner Lysick, if that's something you should take on right off the bat. So let me say this. As of right now, I am the other member of the Finance and Audit Committee, the last one on that list right now. I am neither a finance specialist or an audit specialist, although I am married to one. And I can tell you she's having a meltdown in the other room right now with the puppy because she's so tired from doing her audit for the last week. But that does not qualify me for the job. And so what I propose is I will take on the Policy and Board Development Committee position if you will allow us to place you in the Finance Committee and Audit Committee position. It sounds as though something you might be familiar with you.
Yep, my pleasure.
Would you be okay with that?
Yep, that sounds great.
Great. Thank you very much. That sounds great. And then there was a chat comment. I don't know if it was just to me or if everybody saw that, but Commissioner Fisher says that the West Side Economic Alliance is held just a few blocks from you. Is that right, Commissioner Fisher? That is correct. And he would be willing to take that role on. So just to summarize, we would place Commissioner Lysick in the acting secretary position. We would place Commissioner Sanders in the Policy and Board Development Committee position, and we would place Commissioner Lysick as the second member in the Finance Committee and Audit Committee position. And then Commissioner Fisher would be the primary person for the West Side Economic Alliance. Okay. All right, we're going to need to motion and second for that. So I will now follow up with, can I have a motion and a second to appoint Commissioner Lysick as acting secretary, comma, assign Commissioner Sanders to the Policy and Board Development Committee, comma, assign Commissioner Lysick to the Finance Committee and Audit Committee, comma, and assigned Commissioner Fisher to the West Side Economic Alliance as the primary, period.
This is Commissioner Duggan, so moved.
Thank you.
This is Jim Doan, I second.
Thank you. May I ask the executive assistant to please provide a roll call vote?
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Fisher,
Yes.
Commissioner Lysick,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. This is going to then adjourn the meeting here in just a second. But before we do, I'd like to remind my fellow commissioners that we have executive session immediately following this meeting. That will be on a different channel. So this BAT channel closes and you have to go to the other BAT channel to attend that meeting. I've got 7:02 on the clock now. You probably want to take a quick bio break or something. So would 7:10 be acceptable for everybody to make it back in time? Great. All right. So we will see everybody in the executive session at 7:10. This meeting is now adjourned, and we wish everybody a good evening. Thank you, staff, for attending. Thank you, Catherine, for running the meeting for us.